Welcome to part 10 of my N8N training course. This part will focus on webhooks, and I have structured this part into 5 points. First of all, I'd like to explain what HTTP requests are. Then I would like to define webhook triggers and give you an example in N8N. Then I would like to speak about the tool Postman. Then I would like to present the task, and then at the end of this part we can compare the solutions. In order to understand webhooks, first we need to understand HTTP requests. And just imagine that you open up your Chrome or whatever browser you use, and then you want to go to chatgpt.com and talk to ChatGPT. The first thing you're going to do is, or that Chrome does for you, is it sends a request to chatgpt.com, okay? And then ChatGPT is going to respond to that request, and then Chrome or your browser is going to visualize this request and show you the website of ChatGPT, okay? And in general, we can say that our browser or Chrome is an HTTP client, and in this case, chatgpt.com is an HTTP server. Okay, so there are many HTTP clients and there are many HTTP servers. And one example that affects us here is N8N. Okay, using webhooks, we can make N8N workflows accessible to HTTP requests. So we basically provide an access point to the internet to our N8N workflow. So HTTP requests are like messages that are sent from an HTTP client to an HTTP server. And popular examples for HTTP clients are browsers. For example, Chrome or Chromium or Edge or Comet. Okay, and each HTTP request consists of a header and a body. In the header, we specify what type of HTTP request we are sending, and also what URL. Also, and URLs, for example, you know it, HTTPS www.google.com. Okay? In the body, we specify data. Okay? If you want to visualize it, you can think of it like a block of data that is structured into header and body. And in the header, for example, we say that the HTTP request type is GET, yeah. Then the URL is www.google.de, and the body in this case is empty. Okay. Another example is, for example, when you go to Instagram and you post something, then the actual HTTP request type is called post. The URL is www.instagram.com, and the body consists of certain details about your post. For example, the address of your JPEG file and your description. And in HTTP requests, or in HTTP as a language, as a protocol, we have in total 9 HTTP types, but for us, only 4 are important. There is GET to read data, then there is POST to create data, there is PUT to modify data, and then there is DELETE to delete data. Now that we have understood HTTP requests, it is time to understand webhook triggers. And a webhook trigger is a node that starts a workflow when it receives an incoming HTTP request at its unique webhook URL. Okay, what this exactly means is what I'm going to show you in a second. And by the way, a workflow can have multiple webhook triggers. Okay, so let's have a look at N8N. In your N8N dashboard, please click on Create Workflow, then click on the plus and then search for webhook. Okay, pick the first item here. And now let's have a look. Up here we see that there is the HTTP request type GET that indicates that we are going to be able to receive GET requests, which means that HTTP clients are going to be able to read from our workflow. And then right next to this, we are seeing a URL, an URL here. And this is the access point, this is the URL to our workflow's webhook trigger. So let's click on this. And now we see that we just copied this URL. And now we want to test our webhook trigger, okay? And for testing this, we're gonna click on listen for test event. And now we are seeing that we set it into some sort of waiting state, okay? And then we are going to open a new tab in our HTTP client Chrome, okay? And then we are just gonna paste the URL that we've copied into the address bar and press enter. And now we see that the response coming back from our workflow is message equals workflow was started. Okay, workflow was started is the response coming back from our N8N workflow. So now that our workflow was started, this webhook trigger node produced output that the other nodes in the workflow can use. Let's have a look at the output here. This is all really technical. Okay, so at this point we don't go into detail here. What we want to do now is, we want to change the response. Okay, because message equals workflow was started is something that we want to change now. We want to change the response, okay? So let's go back to our workflow and let's go back to Canvas and let's have a look here, okay? So right now, this is the only node in our workflow and we see that we have a field here that says respond immediately. Okay, but we want to respond with our own message. So we click this here and we say respond using the respond to webhook node. And the respond to webhook node allows us to specify our own response. So let's click this. Let's click back to Canvas and let's click on the little plus. And let's search for respond to webhook. Okay. And right here, we can now say that we want to respond with the input. Yeah, but we don't want this. We want to respond with a static text represented as JSON. Okay, so let's click on this menu here and let's select JSON. Okay. And now we specify our static JSON that we're gonna return. And we just say message equals hello world. Okay, let's click on back to Canvas. Let's click on execute workflow. Now we see that it is waiting for trigger event. Let's go back to our tab and let's just restart the page because then the HTTP client Chrome is going to resend the request. And now we see the response is hello world. Now we have sent a GET request to our workflow using Chrome. And now it is time to send other types of HTTP requests to our workflow. And for doing so, please install Postman. And Postman is an HTTP client that can perform all types of HTTP requests. So of course get, then also post, put, and delete. So please go to postman.com, sign up, and then come back to this video. I think signing up to Postman is totally free. And when you have signed up, please come back to this video and we can continue. So, welcome back. I hope signing up for Postman has been successful. If you have successfully signed up for Postman, you should see the interface like this. Okay. And before we are going to create our first post request in Postman, we go back to our N8N dashboard here, and we are going to create a workflow that accepts or receives post requests. So let's click on Create Workflow. Then let's click on the plus, and here search for Webhook Trigger, of course. Then up here we are seeing the HTTP method set to get. We want to change this to post. Okay. And now we want to copy this URL here. And then we start the HTTP server by clicking on the Listen for Test event. Okay, so now it's waiting for our post request. And now we are going to Postman. And then here in this New Collections tab, we are going to click on the plus. Oops, sorry, not twice, only once. And now we see the new request here. And we want to change the request type from get to post. And then we paste our URL right here. Okay. And then we are going to click on send. And now we see the response message workflow has started. Okay, now we have sent a post request to our workflow. So now let's get back to our workflow and see what we have received here. And right now we can say that we have received a big object that consists of many sub-objects. So this is the outer object here. And then in this nested structure, we see other objects. For example, this object here called body. And like I said earlier, each HTTP request consists of a header and of a body. And now we want to have a look at the body here. And the body here is empty. Okay, so we received an empty body here. And we want to change that because we want to specify a body that contains some data that we use to create something. Okay, and in our example here, I want to send a post request that specifies user data. For example, the first name, the last name, the email. Okay, so what we're going to do here in Postman, we are going to specify a body. Okay, so let's click on the body tab right here. And now we need to specify in what format we're going to send the body. And we want to send JSON. Okay, so for doing so, please click raw and then select JSON here. Yeah. And now we can type valid JSON that defines a JavaScript object. And we're going to say that we want to have a first name. Let's call this for example, Steven. Then the last name is Harris, and the email is steven.harris at let's say gmail.com. Okay. And now we have defined our body that we're going to send to our workflow. So in order to receive this post request, we need to start listening to a post request. So let's click on listen for test event again. And here we see that it's in some sort of waiting mode for the post request. And now we're gonna send it. Okay. So now the response is the same. Yeah, the response is the same. We haven't specified another response yet. But what we're gonna do now is we're gonna now have a look at the body that is received here. And we see that the body that has been received here contains the object that we have specified in Postman. So we have first name, last name, and email. Okay, so what are we gonna do with this data now? We are going to save it in a data table. And for those of you who don't know what a data table is, I have explained it in the previous part, in the previous lecture, in part 9. I would recommend you to watch it. And what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at the data table that is existing here in our N8N account. So let's go back to Canvas. Let's go back to Overview. And here let's have a look at data tables right here. Our users table right here. And now we can see that our data table that we have created in the past lecture consists of the following columns here. First name, last name, email is premium, yeah, and created and updated at and the ID. So what we're going to do now is we're going to insert a new row into this data table. Okay. So how are we going to do this? First of all, let's go back to our workflow. Let's go back to our Webhook Trigger. And let's listen for the event again because N8N forgot the test data. So I'm going to send the post request again here in Postman. Then I'm going to go back to N8N, and now I'm gonna have a look at the body that is received here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the output from this Webhook Trigger node and then send it to a data table node. Okay, so this is the output. Yeah, let's go back to Canvas. Let's click on the little plus here and let's look for data table right here. Okay. And let's select the insert row data table. And now that the data table node is connected to the Webhook Trigger node, we can already see its input here. Yeah, we can see here alongside the other input, we see the body here. And now we just take the first name, last name, and email and create a new row in the data table. So first of all, we're going to select the data table. This is users. Okay. And here for the first name column, we're going to reference to $JSON.body.firstname. Okay. Then for the last name, we also go $JSON.body.lastname. And for the email, we go $JSON.body.email. Okay. So now we can execute the step already with the input data that has arrived here. So let's do this. And now we see that the output that has been generated here is the result coming back from the data table. Yeah, the data table is giving us the row that we have inserted with the newly created ID of 7. Okay, so let's go back to Canvas and let's have a look at the data table and verify that the row has been inserted. So let's click on back to Canvas. Let's, before we do this, save the workflow. And let's go back to the overview. Let's go back to data table. Let's have a look at the users data table. And here we see Stephen Harris has been added to the data table. Okay. So now I'm going to delete this row by checking this checkbox, clicking on delete, confirm, okay. Now let's go back to this workflow and now we want to test it. Okay, so now we want to test that we can add a user with our Webhook trigger that accepts a post request. So let's click on execute workflow. Yeah. And let's go back to Postman. And then we're going to send this post request again. Maybe we can add some data that only Postman knows at this point. For example, Stephen 123, Harris 123, and Stephen 123, Harris. Okay, so this data, this new user should be added to the data table in our N8N cloud. And now let's test it. Let's press send. Okay, let's have a look what happened. Okay, now it worked. Maybe I have forgotten to click this button, but now it worked. Okay, so just for your information, maybe sometimes the post requests are not accepted. Just restart the workflow again. Okay, so both nodes are green. And right below here, right down here, we can see that the body of this webhook post request is exactly as we have defined it in Postman. Stephen 123, Harris 123, the email is also correct. So this looks good. And now let's have a look at the data table in order to verify that the new user has actually been created. So let's click on overview and on data tables. And here we see the new user has been successfully created. Welcome to the task. So first of all, please extend this workflow by a second webhook trigger that accepts GET requests. And this GET webhook trigger is supposed to return all existing users in a JSON array. Okay? And then last, please adapt this workflow so that when a new user is created, the workflow should return a success message in JSON that could, for example, look like this. So have fun, and you may pause the video now until we compare the solutions. Welcome to the solution. So first of all, we're going to create a new webhook trigger. Click on the plus, search for webhook, and click on webhook. Then we're going to go back to Canvas and position the webhook right on top here. Okay, then let's have a double click on the webhook. And we see that the HTTP request type is GET by default. Now we can copy this URL and let's send a test request to it. Let's click on listen for test event. Okay. Let's go to Postman and let's create a new request. Let's paste the URL right here and let's just send it. Okay, so the test request was successfully sent. Now let's go back to N8N. And at this point, we don't care about the output. We just want to basically return the list of users. So let's go back to Canvas and let's create a new data table node here of type get. Okay, we can now choose the users table and we can execute at this step because we don't filter or anything. We just want to have a list of all the users. Let's click on execute. Perfect. Let's go back to Canvas and let's add the respond to webhook node here at the end. Respond to webhook. And here we see that the input is already determined by N8N. And we're going to say that we're going to respond with all the incoming items. Okay. So let's have a look at the output. And this would be the response that we're going to send back to the HTTP client. All right, let's go back to Canvas and let's test it. Let's go back to Postman also and let's fire the HTTP request again. Okay, so now we have an unused respond to webhook node. Let's go back to N8N and here the arrow is right here. Let's have a double click and let's say that we don't respond immediately. We respond using the respond to webhook node. So let's click this. Let's go back to Canvas and let's execute the workflow again. Okay, let's click on the Postman and send the request again. And now we can see that Postman has received all the users from our N8N workflow. Okay, two different systems. Okay, let's go back to N8N. And now we want to, when a new user has been created, we want to respond with a success message. Okay, so right here after this insert row, we're gonna also add a respond to webhook node like this. And let's execute it. And here we see some example input. And we don't want to respond with any incoming items. We want to have our own JSON. And we're going to say that our response JSON is going to look like this. The key is named message. And let's switch to expression now because we want to refer to some key value pairs here. Now we're going to say that inside these quotas, we're going to create a JSON expression. So $JSON.firstName plus empty space plus $JSON.lastName plus empty space was successfully created. Okay, so let's have a look. This looks syntactically correct. Yeah. And don't worry about if the first name and last name is null at this point. This is because we have not actually created a post request from Postman. When we click on execute step, we just have null values at this point, so don't worry. So let's click on execute step. And right here, we just see the output coming from the input, but actually when we send the request with Postman, we get the static JSON that we have defined here. So it's a little bit tricky, but this is important to know when you want to work with n8n. So now let's go back to Canvas and let's execute the workflow again. And let's go back to Postman, right up here to this request. And let's add a new user here. Let's call this Andre Schumacher andres@gmail.com. And now we see Andre Schumacher was successfully created. Okay, so let's go back to n8n and let's have a look at the data table if the new user is persistently stored. Yeah, always safe. Okay, great. Let's go to data tables. Let's have a look. And here we see Andre Schumacher was successfully created.